"Mom, if anything ever happens to me, answer the phone when Elijah calls." Those were the last words Marcus Walker said before an ordinary Saturday afternoon turned into the kind of story people would talk about for years. The summer air hung heavy over the small North Carolina town, the temperature hovering near 88 degrees as families moved between grocery stores, gas stations, and weekend errands. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing felt dangerous. The sunlight reflected off parked cars in the shopping plaza, creating flashes of white across the asphalt. Children laughed near an ice cream stand. A delivery truck rolled slowly through the parking lot. It was the kind of peaceful scene most people forget within hours. Marcus Walker stood beside his aging pickup truck, a faded blue vehicle that had carried him through more than a decade of hard work. At 36 years old, Marcus looked older than his age. Not because life had been cruel, but because responsibility had arrived early and never left. His work boots were worn from long shifts. His hands carried the marks of years spent repairing engines and lifting heavy equipment. Yet there was a quiet kindness in his face that made strangers trust him almost instantly. In the passenger seat sat his mother, Evelyn Walker. At 72, her silver hair framed a face softened by time and memory, though lately memory had become increasingly unreliable. Some mornings she remembered every detail of Marcus's childhood. Other mornings she struggled to remember what she had eaten for breakfast. Marcus never complained. Every doctor appointment, every prescription refill, every difficult conversation fell on his shoulders, and he carried them all without asking anyone for help. As he loaded groceries into the truck bed, his phone vibrated in his pocket. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Elijah Walker. Marcus smiled immediately. Even after all these years, seeing his brother's name still made him feel like a teenager again. The two had entered the world only minutes apart, identical twins who had shared everything growing up except destiny. Elijah had left home and built a career that few Americans could even imagine. Marcus had stayed behind. One brother served his country. The other served his family. Neither considered himself more important than the other. Marcus pressed the answer button and lifted the phone toward his ear. "Hey, man," he said, his voice warm. A crackle of static answered first. Then Elijah's familiar laugh echoed through the speaker. "You still forgetting to take care of yourself?" Marcus shook his head and smiled. Across the parking lot, a police cruiser slowly entered the plaza. Another followed behind it. Most people barely noticed. Marcus certainly didn't. His attention remained on the voice of the brother he had not seen in nearly a year. Nearby, Evelyn watched her son through the windshield. For a brief moment, her expression brightened with recognition. "That's Elijah," she whispered to herself. The sunlight glowed across the truck's side mirror. A warm breeze moved through the trees bordering the lot. Everything felt calm. Everything felt normal. And yet, within the next few minutes, that ordinary parking lot would become the center of a story that would reach far beyond a small North Carolina town. A story that would force powerful people to confront uncomfortable truths, and a story that began with one brother answering a phone call while the entire world remained unaware of who his family really was. The police cruisers rolled slowly through the shopping plaza, their white paint reflecting flashes of sunlight as they passed rows of parked vehicles. Most shoppers barely looked up. In a town like this, police cars were as common as delivery trucks and traffic lights. Marcus Walker certainly paid them no attention. He leaned comfortably against the side of his pickup, listening to his brother's voice through the phone while balancing a bag of groceries in his free hand. Across the lot, Evelyn Walker watched him with quiet pride. Some memories had become difficult to hold on to lately, but one thing never changed. Whenever she looked at Marcus, she saw the same little boy who used to carry her grocery bags before he was strong enough to lift them. Marcus laughed at something Elijah said. The sound carried lightly through the warm afternoon air. For a moment, everything felt exactly as it should. Yet the story of Marcus Walker had never been ordinary. Long before responsibility shaped the lines on his face, he had been the kind of child who worried more about other people than himself. When other boys saved money for bicycles or video games, Marcus saved money for birthday gifts for his mother. When classmates rushed home after school, Marcus often stayed behind helping teachers stack chairs or carry supplies. It was not because anyone asked him to. It was simply who he was. Years later, when their father passed away unexpectedly, That same quiet sense of responsibility became the foundation of Marcus's life. Elijah had already begun moving toward opportunities far beyond their small town. Marcus encouraged him to go. He never expressed jealousy, never complained, never asked his brother to stay. Someone needed to remain with their mother, and Marcus made that choice without hesitation. He worked long hours, often taking extra shifts whenever medical bills arrived. He repaired engines during the day and sometimes accepted weekend jobs that left him exhausted by Monday morning. Friends occasionally told him he was sacrificing too much. Marcus always answered the same way. Family comes first. Those 3 words guided nearly every decision he made. The years passed. Elijah built a remarkable career that eventually carried him across continents and into rooms filled with people whose names appeared on television. Marcus remained exactly where he believed he was needed. Despite the distance between them, the brothers spoke constantly. Some conversations lasted an hour. Others lasted only a few minutes. It did not matter. Their bond survived every mile separating them. Now, standing beneath the bright Carolina sun, Marcus listened as Elijah described plans for an upcoming visit home. The thought immediately brightened his expression. Evelyn would be thrilled. She always seemed more alert whenever both sons were together. Nearby, a young child suddenly broke into a run across part of the parking lot while his worried mother called after him. Marcus glanced in that direction automatically. Helping people had become instinctive. He smiled when the child safely returned to his family. Then he turned his attention back to the phone. What Marcus could not know was that several lives were quietly moving toward the same moment. Different people, different stories, different assumptions. Within minutes, paths that had never crossed before would collide in a way none of them could predict. And when that happened, an ordinary afternoon would begin transforming into something far larger than anyone standing in that parking lot could possibly imagine. Officer Daniel Brooks had been on duty for nearly 10 hours when his patrol vehicle entered the shopping plaza. The air conditioning hummed softly inside the cruiser, fighting against the Carolina heat pressing against the windows. Beside him sat Officer Kevin Turner, scrolling through information that had just appeared on the department system. Earlier that afternoon, dispatch had circulated a report involving a possible vehicle connected to a recent investigation. The details were incomplete. The description was broad. Yet once an idea settled into someone's mind, it often became difficult to see anything else. Daniel considered himself a good officer. He believed in rules, responsibility, and protecting people. But years of stressful calls had also taught him to expect problems before they appeared. That habit sometimes helped. Other times it quietly shaped assumptions that had never been tested. As the cruiser rolled past the gas station, Daniel noticed Marcus's aging pickup truck parked near the edge of the lot. Something about it seemed familiar. He glanced again. The color, the age, the general description. None of it was exact, yet none of it felt entirely different either. Kevin looked up from the screen. That might be it, he said. Daniel slowed the cruiser slightly. Across the parking lot, Marcus remained focused on his conversation with Elijah. He laughed again, completely unaware that anyone was paying attention to him. The sunlight reflected from the chrome trim of his truck. Nearby shoppers pushed carts filled with groceries toward their vehicles. A teenager carried a stack of pizza boxes out of a restaurant. The ordinary rhythm of the afternoon continued uninterrupted. Daniel studied Marcus from a distance. He saw a man standing beside an older pickup truck holding a phone. What he did not see was the son who had spent years caring for his mother. He did not see the brother who had sacrificed opportunities so someone else could pursue theirs. He did not see the countless acts of kindness that defined Marcus Walker's life. He saw only a stranger connected in his mind to a possibility. Sometimes the most important details are the ones people fail to notice. Inside the truck, Evelyn watched her son through the windshield. For a brief moment, confusion clouded her expression. Then recognition returned. "Marcus," she called softly through the open window. He turned immediately and smiled. "Just a minute, Mom." The affection in his voice was effortless. On the other end of the phone, Elijah continued talking, unaware that events were quietly shifting hundreds of miles away from everything he could control. The brothers discussed family, old memories, and plans for the future. Nothing dramatic, nothing extraordinary. Just 2 brothers sharing a conversation they assumed would continue tomorrow, if not later that evening. Daniel parked the cruiser near the edge of the lot. Another patrol unit arrived behind them. The afternoon sunlight flashed across the windshields. Several nearby shoppers glanced over before returning to their errands. The atmosphere remained calm, but a subtle tension had begun forming beneath the surface. It was the kind of tension that appears before anyone realizes a misunderstanding is taking shape. Marcus slipped his phone slightly away from his ear and reached for another grocery bag resting near the truck bed. His movements were relaxed and unhurried. Around him, the shopping plaza remained filled with ordinary sounds: distant traffic, shopping carts rattling across pavement, children laughing near the ice cream stand, and the warm breeze moving through the trees. Yet somewhere between assumption and reality, two completely different stories were moving toward the same moment, and neither side understood the other at all. Marcus adjusted the grocery bag in his hand and glanced toward his mother again. Evelyn had begun searching through her purse for something she had probably forgotten she already placed inside moments earlier. Marcus smiled softly. Some days were harder than others, but he never allowed frustration to show. "I will be right there, Mom," he called gently. On the phone, Elijah laughed. "You say that every time." "Because she worries every time," Marcus replied. The familiar exchange warmed both brothers. Across the parking lot, Officer Daniel Brooks stepped out of his cruiser. The afternoon heat wrapped around him immediately. He rested one hand on the vehicle door while continuing to observe Marcus from a distance. Officer Kevin Turner joined him a moment later. Neither man looked angry. Neither appeared aggressive. Yet both were operating under an assumption that had not been fully tested. Daniel glanced again at the information displayed on the mobile computer inside the cruiser. The description remained incomplete. Several details matched loosely. Several did not. But uncertainty often leaves room for interpretation, and interpretation can quietly become conviction. Marcus placed another bag into the truck bed and listened as Elijah described a family gathering he hoped to organize later that year. It had been too long since everyone sat around the same table together. Marcus agreed immediately. Family was the one thing he never postponed. As the conversation continued, movement near the center of the parking lot suddenly caught his attention. A young boy, perhaps 6 years old, had slipped away from his mother while chasing a bright red balloon dancing in the breeze. The child moved quickly between parked vehicles, completely focused on the balloon floating several feet ahead. His mother called after him, but her voice was lost among the sounds of the busy plaza. Marcus noticed the situation instantly. He always noticed things like that. Some people walk through life focused only on themselves. Marcus had never been one of those people. He lowered the phone slightly. "Hold on a second," he told Elijah. "What is wrong?" Elijah asked. "Nothing. Just a kid running where he should not be." Marcus began walking toward the child without hesitation. The movement immediately drew Daniel's attention. From his perspective, the situation appeared different. He saw a man moving away from a truck that had already attracted his interest. Kevin noticed it too. The officers exchanged a brief look. Meanwhile, the little boy continued after the balloon as it bounced across the pavement in unpredictable bursts. His mother moved faster now, concern spreading across her face. Marcus increased his pace as well, hoping to guide the child back safely before panic took over. The sunlight reflected sharply from nearby windshields. Shopping carts rattled across the concrete. A warm breeze carried the smell of fresh bread from a bakery near the grocery store entrance. Ordinary sounds filled the air, but beneath them a different tension was building. Evelyn watched from the truck with growing confusion. She could not fully understand what was happening, only that Marcus was moving away from her. She pressed one hand against the dashboard and stared through the windshield. On the phone, Elijah waited for his brother to return to the conversation. Hundreds of miles away, he had no way of knowing that a simple act of concern for a stranger was about to place Marcus directly at the center of a misunderstanding that would change many lives forever. The red balloon skipped across the pavement and drifted toward the exit lane of the shopping plaza. The little boy chased after it with the determination only children possess, completely unaware of how quickly situations can change. His mother was running now, her voice trembling as she called his name again and again. Marcus moved faster. Not because he believed he was a hero. Not because he wanted attention. He simply saw a child who needed help. The phone remained in his hand as he crossed several parking spaces. "Marcus, what is happening?" Elijah asked from hundreds of miles away. "Just a second," Marcus replied, breathing a little harder. A kid got loose. The concern in his voice was immediate and genuine. Behind him, officers Daniel Brooks and Kevin Turner had already left their cruiser. What began as routine curiosity was rapidly becoming confusion. They watched Marcus move quickly across the lot and interpreted the scene through an entirely different lens. Daniel called out, hoping to get Marcus's attention. The sounds of the plaza swallowed most of the words. Shopping carts rattled. Engines started. Conversations overlapped. Marcus never heard him. His focus remained on the child. The balloon bounced once more and caught beneath a parked vehicle. The little boy lunged toward it, smiling as though the entire world consisted of that single bright object. Marcus finally reached him. He lowered himself slightly and extended a hand. "Easy there, buddy," he said warmly. "Your mom is looking for you." The child looked up, surprised but not frightened. At that exact moment, the boy's mother arrived, breathless and emotional. Relief flooded her face. She immediately pulled her son into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she said repeatedly. "Thank you so much." Marcus smiled. "No problem at all. It should have ended there. A simple act of kindness. A grateful mother. A child safely returned." Instead, confusion continued to grow around the edges of the moment. Daniel and Kevin approached, still attempting to understand what they believed they had witnessed. Other shoppers began slowing down. Some stopped entirely. Curious eyes turned toward the small gathering. The atmosphere shifted. Not hostile, not chaotic, just uncertain. Marcus noticed the officers for the first time and offered a polite nod. He had nothing to hide and no reason to feel nervous. Yet uncertainty has a way of spreading from person to person. Daniel asked several questions. Marcus answered calmly. His voice never rose. His posture remained relaxed. He even apologized for not hearing the officers earlier. The phone was still connected. Elijah listened quietly now. Something about his brother's tone had changed. Marcus rarely sounded unsettled. Across the parking lot, Evelyn stepped out of the truck. The afternoon sun reflected against the windshield behind her as she searched for Marcus with worried eyes. She could not fully understand the conversation taking place, only that people were gathering around her son. Her heart began to race. Marcus noticed her immediately. Concern replaced everything else on his face. "Mom," he called gently. "Stay by the truck. I will be right there." The words were simple, reassuring. But as the warm Carolina breeze moved through the parking lot and more people turned their attention toward the scene, an uncomfortable feeling settled over everyone present. Somewhere beneath the questions, assumptions, and misunderstandings, the afternoon was quietly approaching a turning point that none of them could yet see. The parking lot gradually settled into an uneasy quiet after the crowd began to disperse. The grateful mother carried her son back toward her vehicle, holding his small hand tightly, as if she never wanted to let go again. The bright red balloon had long since disappeared into the blue Carolina sky, reduced to a tiny speck above the shopping plaza. Marcus stood beside his truck once more, but the warmth that had filled the afternoon earlier seemed distant now. A thin layer of clouds had begun drifting across the sun, softening the light and casting long shadows across the pavement. Evelyn sat quietly in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap. She looked tired. The confusion in her eyes came and went like waves rolling against a shoreline. Marcus opened the door and knelt beside her. "You doing okay, Mom?" he asked gently. Evelyn studied his face for several seconds before offering a small smile. "You look just like your father when you worry." Marcus lowered his eyes and laughed softly. "I hope that is a good thing." She reached out and touched his cheek. "It is." For a moment, everything else faded away. The officers, the questions, the tension, none of it mattered. It was simply a son sitting beside his mother beneath a quiet afternoon sky. The breeze carried the scent of rain from somewhere beyond the horizon. Across the lot, Officer Daniel Brooks remained near his cruiser. He watched Marcus from a distance. The image before him did not match the assumptions he had formed earlier. The man he saw now was patient, respectful, focused entirely on caring for an elderly woman who clearly depended on him. Daniel found himself replaying the previous 20 minutes in his head. Small details surfaced one after another. Marcus helping the child. Marcus answering every question calmly. Marcus showing concern only for his mother. Doubt slowly began replacing certainty. Inside the truck, Marcus finally returned the phone to his ear. The line was still connected. Elijah had remained silent for much of the exchange, listening more than speaking. "Sorry about that," Marcus said. "Sounds like a long afternoon," Elijah replied. Marcus leaned against the truck and looked toward the distant tree line bordering the plaza. The leaves moved gently beneath the growing cloud cover. "Not really," he answered. "Just one of those strange days." On the other end of the call, Elijah hesitated. Something about his brother's voice unsettled him. The two had known each other their entire lives. They could hear emotions that other people missed completely. "You sure everything is all right?" he asked quietly. Marcus glanced through the windshield at Evelyn. She had closed her eyes for a moment, resting peacefully against the seat. A soft expression crossed his face. "As long as she is all right, I am all right." The words hung in the silence that followed. Above them, the afternoon light continued to fade behind drifting clouds. The shopping plaza seemed calmer now, almost suspended in time. Yet beneath that stillness, events already set in motion were continuing to move forward. Neither Marcus nor Elijah knew it yet, but the quiet moment they were sharing would soon become a memory both brothers would hold onto for the rest of their lives. The call ended a few minutes later, but Elijah could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Thousands of miles away, inside a secure operations facility, he remained seated long after the screen in front of him had gone dark. Around him, conversations continued. Personnel moved through hallways. Monitors displayed maps and briefings. Yet his attention stayed fixed on his brother's voice. Marcus had sounded calm, but Elijah knew every inflection, every pause, every subtle shift in tone. Twins often shared a connection people dismissed as coincidence. Elijah had stopped trying to explain it years ago. Back in North Carolina, the sky had turned a deeper shade of gray. Marcus finished loading the last grocery bag into the truck and climbed into the driver's seat. Evelyn remained quiet beside him, staring through the windshield at the parking lot. For several moments, neither spoke. Then she surprised him. "Your brother is worried." Marcus glanced toward her. "You heard that?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "I remember more than people think." Marcus smiled. "He worries too much." But even as he said it, his own phone began vibrating again. The screen displayed an unfamiliar Washington number. Marcus almost ignored it. Almost. Something told him not to. He answered. "Marcus Walker?" a professional voice asked. "Yes. Please hold for General Elijah Walker." Marcus frowned immediately. "General?" For a second he thought someone was joking. Then the line clicked. Elijah's voice appeared. Serious this time. Focused. "Marcus, I need you to tell me exactly what happened today." Marcus laughed softly. "You flew halfway across the world and became dramatic." Elijah did not laugh. The silence that followed erased Marcus's smile. "Elijah, just tell me." Marcus explained everything. The child, the balloon, the officers, the questions, the misunderstanding. Nothing more, nothing less. As he spoke, another silence settled over the line. When Marcus finished, Elijah exhaled slowly. "I knew it." "Knew what?" "The name of one of those officers reached a federal database less than an hour ago." Marcus blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Someone filed a preliminary incident report." Marcus looked confused. "It was nothing. It should have been nothing." Elijah's voice grew quieter. "But somebody entered enough information that my office was notified." Marcus sat frozen. For the first time all day, he realized there were parts of his brother's life he still did not fully understand. Growing up, Elijah had never talked about rank, never talked about influence, never talked about what he actually did. To Marcus, he was simply a brother. Nothing more, nothing less. Outside the truck, Officer Daniel Brooks stood near his cruiser reviewing information on a tablet. His eyes suddenly widened. He looked again, then a third time. The name on the screen matched the one from the incident report. Marcus Walker. Related contact, General Elijah Walker. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. He opened another file. Then another. Photographs appeared. Official commendations. National security briefings. Public ceremony images standing beside cabinet officials and senior military leadership. Daniel slowly lowered the tablet. The man he had spent the afternoon questioning was not connected to someone powerful because of money or politics. He was connected to one of the most respected military leaders in the country. Across the parking lot, Marcus remained completely unaware of what Daniel had just discovered. He was still focused on his mother, still focused on getting groceries home, still focused on ordinary responsibilities. But for Officer Daniel Brooks, the world suddenly looked very different. Because for the first time that day, he was no longer seeing a stranger. He was finally seeing the person who had been standing in front of him all along. Daniel Brooks remained seated inside his cruiser long after the screen went dark. The late afternoon light reflected across the dashboard, but he barely noticed. The photographs he had just seen refused to leave his mind. Images of General Elijah Walker standing beside senior military leaders. Images from ceremonies honoring extraordinary service. Images from briefings attended by people whose decisions shaped national security. Yet none of that was what troubled him most. What troubled him was realizing that none of those things should have mattered in the first place. Marcus Walker should have been treated with dignity, whether he knew a general or not. Whether he knew anyone important or not. Daniel looked through the windshield toward the blue pickup truck. Marcus was helping his mother adjust her seatbelt. The motion was simple, gentle, familiar. The same man Daniel had watched throughout the afternoon. The same man who stopped to help a frightened child. The same man who answered every question respectfully. Suddenly Daniel saw the entire day differently. He stepped out of the cruiser and began walking across the parking lot. The breeze had grown cooler now. Dark clouds stretched across the horizon, turning the sunlight gold along the edges. Marcus noticed him approaching and lowered his phone. Elijah was still on the line. 1 second, Marcus said quietly. Daniel stopped several feet away. For a moment, neither man spoke. The noise of the shopping plaza seemed distant. Shopping carts rolled across concrete. Traffic moved beyond the intersection. Somewhere nearby, a car radio played softly. Ordinary sounds continued while Daniel searched for the right words. "Mr. Walker," he finally said. Marcus nodded politely. "Officer." Daniel glanced toward Evelyn, who watched the exchange with cautious eyes. Then he looked back at Marcus. "I owe you an apology." Marcus blinked, surprised. Daniel took a slow breath. "I made assumptions today that I should not have made. I should have paid more attention to what was actually happening instead of what I thought was happening." The words were difficult for him to say, which made them honest. Marcus studied him for several seconds. There was no anger in his expression, no desire to embarrass him, only quiet patience. "We all make mistakes," Marcus replied. Daniel shook his head. "Some mistakes matter more than others." The statement lingered in the air between them. Across the phone line, Elijah listened silently. Daniel continued. "The little boy's mother gave a statement. Several witnesses did too. Everyone said the same thing. You were helping." Marcus looked down briefly before answering. "A child needed help. That is all." Daniel almost laughed at how simple Marcus made it sound. Most people would have used the moment to defend themselves. Marcus did not. He was still focused on the child, still focused on doing the right thing. That realization hit Daniel harder than any official report ever could. He extended his hand. "Thank you for helping that family." Marcus accepted the handshake without hesitation. "You are welcome." The tension that had hovered over the parking lot all afternoon seemed to dissolve with that simple exchange. Nearby, Evelyn smiled faintly. On the phone, Elijah finally spoke. "Marcus." Marcus lifted the phone back toward his ear. "Yeah." For the first time in hours, Elijah sounded calm. "Mom's still with you." Marcus looked through the windshield at Evelyn and smiled. Right where she belongs. The drive home was quiet. Rain finally arrived, just as Marcus guided the old pickup onto the country road leading toward the small house where he and Evelyn had lived for years. Soft drops tapped against the windshield in a steady rhythm. The headlights painted long golden streaks across the wet pavement. Beside him, Evelyn had fallen asleep. Her head rested gently against the seat, her expression peaceful in a way Marcus had not seen for weeks. He smiled and lowered the radio volume even further. Some victories in life were small. A calm afternoon, a safe drive home, a parent resting comfortably. Those moments mattered more to him than anything else. Nearly a month later, autumn arrived across North Carolina. The trees surrounding the Walker home glowed with shades of amber and gold. One Saturday morning, Marcus stood on the front porch holding a mug of coffee while watching sunlight spill across the yard. A black SUV slowly turned into the driveway. Another followed behind it. Marcus laughed the moment he saw who stepped out. Elijah Walker crossed the yard wearing jeans, work boots, and a simple jacket. No ceremony, no entourage, no medals, just a brother coming home. Evelyn appeared at the doorway moments later. For a brief second, she seemed confused. Then recognition lit up her face. "My boys," she whispered. Elijah wrapped his arms around her carefully. Marcus stood beside them. The three remained there for a long moment while the wind moved through the trees overhead. Later that afternoon, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. Officer Daniel Brooks stepped out holding a small cardboard box. He looked nervous, more nervous than he had during any moment in the shopping plaza. Marcus greeted him warmly anyway. Daniel opened the box and removed a framed photograph. It showed the little boy from the parking lot standing beside his mother. Across the bottom, written in careful handwriting, were simple words. "Thank you for helping me get back to my mom." Daniel handed the frame to Marcus. "His family wanted you to have this." Marcus stared at the photograph for several seconds before smiling. "Tell them thank you." Daniel nodded. "I will." Before leaving, he glanced toward Elijah. The two men exchanged a brief look. Respect passed silently between them. Not because of rank, not because of influence, because both understood something important. Character reveals itself when nobody is watching. As evening settled over the property, the family gathered on the porch. The rain from weeks earlier had long disappeared. Crickets filled the air with their familiar song. The sky slowly shifted from orange to deep blue. Evelyn sat between her sons holding both of their hands. Some memories would continue to fade. Doctors could not stop that. Tom could not stop that. But tonight she remembered enough. She remembered their names. She remembered their smiles. She remembered that she was loved. The porch light cast a warm circle across the wooden floorboards. No speeches were given. No lessons were announced. No one mentioned misunderstandings, reports, or titles. The framed photograph rested beside Marcus's chair. The evening breeze moved softly through the trees. Elijah looked toward his brother. Marcus looked toward his mother. And as darkness settled gently over the Carolina countryside, the only thing anyone could hear was the quiet sound of a family finally sitting together exactly where they belonged.